Mike Lara.
Here.
Treasurer Sharon Geiser.
Here.
Chairperson Elaine Morgan. Oh, she emailed and she said she'll be out of town. Okay, she's not here. Co-chairperson Ray Santos, I'm here. Member Diana Harris. Excuse me, she's not here. Member Jennifer Burnett, not here. Member John Halliwell.
Here.
Okay. And member Richard Benecki.
Here.
Okay, that's all we have. Still, we have a quorum, so we'll proceed on the meeting on that. Let's, any excuses on that? I mean, take note, like on, I know Elaine Morgan will be out of town today. Diane Harris, any news on that?
Well,
We'll discuss
we
that
can
later.
talk about that when we get
Okay.
down to the organization.
And Jennifer Burnett, any same thing?
Yes, I
Okay.
think so. Don't you?
Yeah, let's do that. Why don't we pledge the Legion? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's good.
Any adjustments on the agenda, today's agenda? Yes, John.
Mr. Chairman, I was looking at, shall we say, a question. When we went through the people and we mentioned that some were missing, did we take an action to give them an excused absence?
Can we,
Sure. I would think so. I mean, Mike, do you have a strong
Yeah,
feeling on that? I think it's,
We can, I'll make a motion to excuse Elaine Morgan,
okay,
Diana Harris, and Jennifer
Burnett,
Burnett. Thank you.
Second.
second, okay.
Thank
Good.
you.
Anything else? Okay. Any adjustments on the agenda? None? On the approval of this agenda, I'm just following up the list right now, so, okay, we move on. Any, on this public comment, seems like I don't have any sheet in here, so I will just,
just open and close it then.
okay, we open for public comments, and nothing in here, we'll go ahead and close it.
So open it at 6:12.
At 6:12, okay. And close it also at 6:12, so. Okay, this is the action items, will be, the housekeeping items. I don't know who does have the quorum right now.
I have the list for housekeeping items.
Okay,
Let's see if I do this. Whew. The housekeeping items, the first thing that's come up is in doing the minutes. Everyone has to speak into the microphone. If people who are too far back, it's not picking up your voice. They can't hear what you're saying in order to have a proper record of the meeting. Okay. So be sure when you do speak that you get close to a microphone. If you're having a conversation with somebody next to you, and you are near the microphone, they hear every word you're saying on the tape. So the recording is picking up all the conversations. So if you're going to have a sidebar, know that it's going to get in the electronic recording of the meeting. They're all there. So otherwise, it needs to be either part of the meeting or notes, something like that. But know that everything you say is getting picked up if you're near the microphone. The clarity of the audio is also impacted when you're either mumbling a little bit, or if someone else is speaking at the same time, it's putting all the sound together, and it's really, really difficult. So we just have to be careful when we're speaking that it's one person at a time into the microphone and clear. So that's really all that Nicole had come up with for the housekeeping on that.
Very good. Thanks.
The quorum on there, I thought maybe you were going to request we wear a tie or something.
Yes, suits and yes.
Suits and tie.
No, it's more, it's with the, so that you knew what was happening with all the audio. That really was
Okay.
focus.
That's a good address. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good.
And then the second is the Finance and Audit Committee update. City Council has requested that the committee report back to them on what it is they have going on. That's not something that this committee has done before, but we need to discuss it and come up with what it is that needs to be reported back to council and how that's going to be presented to them.
Okay.
Say that again?
A report back to City Council on the work that the committee is doing, like status, what you have going on, what's on the plate, what's being done.
That has not been happening?
No, that has not been happening, and they do want a report back at council tomorrow night. So,
I was under the assumption that was happening. Did you make?
When, as part of the treasurer's report, I would report back on significant things that happened during the meeting. So,
They want more?
so the point of clarity, first of all, of course, is is this a request from council members? Do you know if it was a request for a written report specifically on this, or is it that they just want that communication to be broader? Do you know?
I'm not sure what the intent is, honestly. Nicole had the notations and had left it for me. I
Okay.
believe she said it came from the very end of the last council meeting, which I was not present for, so I didn't hear the very end of it.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I feel the same as Mr. Beneke, because I remember at last meeting, we discussed things that we wanted communicated to the council, and we actually were asking for their guidance on some of the issues. So I think that we've taken the action, and I think maybe what Mr. Beneke was trying to point out is that somehow we sit here and we talk about it, but the information doesn't get back to the council by the people that are supposed to be taking it back to the council.
So do you remember what the guidance that we needed to get from council was on, John, since you remember us saying that?
I think it had to do with, one of the issues that we were looking at was, we were looking for direction, that it seemed like that there were some things that were happening, and we wanted clarification from the council as to actually what we're supposed to be doing. Because there were
Don't
some.
remember that coming up at the last meeting.
Yeah.
I remember the last meeting, we talked about the subcommittee, and we put that on this agenda. I remember we talked about needing to get back on the report. I remember that we did the reorganization. We don't have the minutes in front of us, so,
They were attached to the agenda.
okay, sorry.
Kind of looking through them. I don't think I copied it on that one. I think that's
Okay.
just the agenda. But then we had the financial reports, update on the software, and then Todd did a city manager report to the committee, but I didn't know.
So all of that information goes directly to the council anyways, in terms of what's going on with the software and,
Right. So I'm not sure what if there was additional information
I
that.
don't remember any specific thing.
I'm,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we serve basically at the pleasure of the council.
Right.
That's correct.
So,
hope that the council would, if they do have any concerns regarding our sphere of influence or our thought process on an item or whatever, that they let us know if there's a concern there that should be addressed by this group. And then, obviously, if we receive that concern from them and we do address it, I hope that then is communicated back to the council in terms of how we answer that concern, whether we come up with ideas or make a motion or whatever.
Well, you have two council members here.
Correct.
And I don't remember the council expressing a concern. Maybe we were out of the room, but I don't remember that.
Go ahead, Mike.
I don't recall that either.
Yeah.
Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem Carroll. I do recall a conversation, I don't think it was last meeting, but it was a couple of meetings back that John is referencing as far as getting some direction from council. I would suggest that if they want to report back, that we identify those items that we're currently working on, such as the SEO, with the committee, and then as items that are currently being worked on, and then maybe another section of proposed items that the Finance Committee is considering to see if council is in agreement with the direction that we're going. And maybe at that time, they can give us feedback indicating, well, we would prefer that the, Finance Committee not work on that specific thing, whatever that may be. But
Yeah.
should that report just be added to the treasurer's report? Is that what we're?
It was my understanding that the treasurer was the liaison to explain, just in summary, what the Finance and Audit Committee was doing, so that opens a dialogue where then the council can say, well, so you're looking at the budget on Monday, and ask any details that they need to ask, so that they're aware of what is going on. So I can work with you on that a little bit, Sharon, if you like. All I would do is I would usually do a summary of issues that were talked about, and then if there was a concern from those issues that needed to be, or a request for direction that needed to go to council, that discussion would be opened up. And if council felt that they needed to know more, they would usually ask during that summary.
I was wondering about that at the last council meeting, but
I think when we talked at first, when you very first came on, we talked about, the summary information coming through on the treasurer's report. But maybe you and I just need to probably sit down and figure out what that summary is, based on what I did before, not with any special role as any council member or anything, but just to help you do the transition. If nobody objects, I'll make sure and do that with Sharon, so that we do that. And as I recall, John, you are correct. We did say that we might need to get more input from council going forward, because we were sort of in our first year.
Right.
But that's not an agendized item, so we'd have to probably put it on the agenda in the future after we knew what we wanted to know from council, right?
Yeah, or maybe maybe at the end of the next council meeting, I'll request, or you can request, that we put the Finance Committee on the agenda and providing items that council would like Finance Committee to review. Something to that.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Yes, John.
One of the reasons that I stated the fact of what are we doing is that it seemed to me when we sat down and started looking at what we were going to be doing, one of the things that was discussed was that they were going to have community outreach meetings, and after we had done some of the audit things, some of the committee would be involved in going out and doing that outreach. But in reading the Record Gazette recently, I read an article that says that staff is going to be going to all of the areas of the community and meeting with, in particular, each one of the CFDs to try and discuss what is going on with their particular CFD as to where did the money go and how is the money being spent, and can we go back and refinance
I
and
think we're off topic.
all those issues. So to me, if we were originally being looked at to do that and staff is going out and doing it now, then it seems that our guidance needs to be given as to should we even be looking at having to do that.
Any comment on that?
I think that there's confusion on that point. I don't believe that I ever recall that the finance, and anybody correct me if they have a different opinion, that we were never to be engaged in going out to the community. One of the reasons when the Finance and Audit Committee was formed with so many members of the community and never having the chair be an elected official, which is kind of how we started, was so that the community was linked into the Finance and Audit Committee. Not that the Finance and Audit Committee was going to go out as ambassadors into the community. I never understood that, and if anybody else did, then you can, by all means, bring it up. But on that point, I never recall that we were supposed to be ambassadors out into the community. Now, the fact that the staff is going to do, at the request of council, financial meetings is appropriate. And it seems like it's out of the reach of anything that we were designated to do, that staff would be going around communicating to the public about CFDs. I don't think that we're any kind of a control group on financial information in the community. Now, that's my understanding, but anybody else who has a different one, please jump in and question it.
Yes, Mike.
I agree, but we did have a discussion at one point in regards to getting a CFD training class so that if we were approached by members of the community, we'd be able to respond to their questions.
That's true, yeah.
And memory serves me, I don't think we've had that occur at this time. So.
We did have the CFD meeting because I remember having, even Brian Forbath was here. We looked at one of the CFDs specifically that night. Was it in December? Might have been.
We had a
So
consultant.
we did have a CFD
We did.
informational meeting.
We did. We didn't, it was a forum for this group to get as educated
Right.
as they could be so that they understood CFDs. But it wasn't what some people thought the elaborate sort of training or workshop was going to be, which was fine. It seemed to suit us all pretty well to get us started. And I think that, the Finance and Audit Committee, if any members want to go out to the CFD meetings and attend, then they should.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm planning on attending at least one, if not more, so if you'll tell me where they are.
We also were given the charge, which we never really fulfilled, to come up with a policy, recommendation to council for a policy, kind of an outline that some of these groups could use to request a change in their status or whatever. I mean, a process, I know Mayor White was really big on this, establishing some kind of guidelines or process whereby, let's say, an HOA came to the city and said, we were interested in reviewing, our development bonds. How do we go about doing that? And then you give them kind of a handout, a little briefing on, this is how you do that. So they can then take it back, make decisions, put forth a request, and the council would consider it and all that. But I think we've kind of gone beyond that now, from my understanding, because of what we've learned about those CFDs and what the staff is going to do at the request of the council. Currently, what the staff is going to do, they're going to go to these groups. So maybe there's not a need for that anymore.
Okay. Just
Well-
take, go ahead.
That would be a good thing for the treasurer to bring up in the council meeting that, that was touched on, whether that still needs to be done, and then get direction from council. I would think. What do you think, Mike?
I agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that that issue probably falls underneath the issue that we've been talking all along, and that is that we have not, I think we pretty much have done it, but I don't think we've got all the information available. And the point, in my understanding, was that the part of this discussion by the staff is to tell the community what's going on so that the community then can take and say what they'd like to do. So if there are districts that can't benefit from refunds, refinancing, then why go through the process of developing a procedure to do that if you're not going to be able to do it?
Well, I think we stand at risk of getting off topic here.
Getting deeper in here.
And I'm sure if we had the city attorney here, he'd probably be telling us we were getting
Yeah, we're
pretty
getting
broad
deeper
in
in
our
this.
swing at this point.
Well, actually, we're probably not, because this is a broad brush kind of topic that we're talking about, so, yeah, I think it would fall under the category, but, I think if we've discussed it, I don't know if
Yeah.
we can discuss any further, but, you know, John makes a great point. We need to continue a given, direction now that things are changing a little bit, and the council ought to, and Councilwoman Carol Nancy said basically the same thing, take it back to the council.
Yeah. Well, see, the item is finance and audit update, standing item on the council agenda. And we did discuss that. And so now we're discussing on whether we should be doing a special project on reporting on how citizens can do CFDs. And I do, John, you are correct. I don't want to make a misstatement here. You certainly are correct that we did discuss doing it, but I'm just saying that I don't think it's included in the item, standing item on council agenda anymore. I just think we're getting a little broad with it, that's
Right.
all.
Unless this is an item that you definitely want brought to council tomorrow evening, then it can be an item through the treasurer's report, you know, this particular,
that's-
right. That, so it can be included tomorrow.
Well, see, and that brings up another question. Normally, a committee like this, we'll discuss a lot of things. But if we make a recommendation, it should be in the form of a motion. Approved and seconded by this group, and then put in the record that we make a motion to ask the council, blah, 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 approve second. So, right now, we're all over the board with a bunch of ideas. Are we making a recommendation to the council? If we are, I would, if you made that motion that you just said about letting the council.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah, I would second that motion.
Okay, I make a motion that we reinstate the reporting to council on the results of the Standing Financial Committee meeting and receive input from the council as part of that. I make a motion that we reinstitute the reporting to council on the results of the Standing Financial Committee meeting, including any issues that we want brought to council and taking back any direction from council. Thank you. Is that clear enough for you, Sharon? Thank you.
Can we move on the next topic on item
Well,
number 2?
does everybody
Number
agree?
3? Everything, any discussions on that motion? And he seconded, any discussion on that? Call for a vote?
I agree.
I agree, I agree. Agree. Okay, carried. Okay. Item number 3, adoption of minutes dated April 10th, 2017.
So moved.
Okay. Carried.
It takes a vote.
Take a vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, carried. Item number 4, budget 2018. On this,
See if I can do this.
Ms. Malone. Okay.
Dun, dun, dun. Where is this? Third slide. Is that the one? Yeah, where's the start?
To be on there
Wait,
for us to discuss it. So the first thing is going to be the subcommittee, the second,
on the bottom,
we don't have any update.
down here,
But even if we
that right there,
it'll give us
where it
direction
says
going forward.
slide.
All right,
Okay.
Heather? The air.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, now, this presentation will be the same one that was given to the council, pretty much.
Pretty much. It's pretty much the same. Yes. And everything that's here is in the packet that you have, plus the packet you have has a little more detail in it, which I'll explain as we get to that too.
Our charge here is to just vote the information.
Or can we comment on the budget? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
It's for input.
Two-way street kind of.
Okay.
Absolutely. If you have comments, questions, suggestions, we're open to that. And then we'll be presenting hopefully a finalized budget, not tomorrow night, but at the following council meeting for adoption. So this is just part of the process.
Process, I'm not familiar with the council here, but the process is, do you have 2 readings before you adopt the budget? Or do you have 1 reading and then the adoption? Or
We've been doing one.
some councils have 2.
Yeah.
And then have a final.
Right.
Yeah, that's
It's my understanding that, that we'll do one, but that the council, again, under the guidelines of how we started, they want us to look at the budget, they want us to ask our questions. Obviously, I don't know what everybody's questions are going to be. So if we end up at a point where we're satisfied, then we would do a recommendation to council that the budget seemed in order and that we would recommend that they adopt it. If there's a material concern, I'm assuming we'd bring that up, and that would get in the way of it being smoothed over unless Milana could address it before the next council meeting. No?
Yeah.
So I think that's what we're,
adoption of this will not be tomorrow, it'll be.
No.
right,
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Which obviously, too, gives time to address anything material that we may have a concern with in there.
Right. But if there's something more major, I mean, we have more time still that we could go to council. We were just looking at it would be in 2 weeks if everything goes smoothly.
It's just a point of interest, if nothing else. We are a citizen budget and finance committee. And I think it would not have looked good perception-wise for us to receive this document tonight and have the council approve it tomorrow.
Right.
I mean, it would look like, okay, we're just, I don't know what we are. We're not really doing our job if we
Right.
just one day. So I'm glad to hear that the council will be doing 2 weeks. But if we do have some concerns, I would hope they would take those into consideration.
Absolutely. And as I said, if there's something major that maybe we needed to change or we didn't pick up on, we have time to look at that more closely. Okay? So we're good? Okay. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, so we started the budget this year by trying to figure out exactly where we stood as a city, our financial condition. Can't progress forward unless you know where you're at. We've been doing these budgets based on generalities, trying to determine where we're at and where we're going without having a lot of basis information to go by. So in looking at this, we put the years that we know. Fiscal 15 was audited. We have fiscal 16, which is where we're looking at, that was closed, and we should be starting that audit shortly. Fiscal 17, we projected how it looks like this year is going to end. And then using that information, we built the budget for fiscal 18. So this is a look at the general fund for those 4 fiscal periods to see how the city will roll forward numbers-wise in the financial condition. And looking at the revenues and expenses, in fiscal 15, we had a large expenses greater than revenues. The bulk of that is because of the write-off of that loan between the RDA and the general fund, the $21,500,000. So that's really what caused the majority of that. In fiscal 16, you can see we have revenue over expenses. We were conservative with what we thought the revenues were going to be, and we fought really hard to keep our expenses down, which left us with a positive $3 million for fiscal 16. Unaudited, but I don't anticipate any significant changes with the audit, which then brought our fund balance still negative, but it made it better. So we went from $7.5 million to $4.4 million negative. With fiscal 17, there's been a little more activity. We followed the same path for the revenues and expenses, where it looks like we're going to show up at the end of the year positive, but we had 2 additional situations in this year that also have an impact. One is the negotiation and settlement for the Heartland development, which is additional $3 million coming into the general fund. And then we had the transfer of the one-time CFD pay-go that came to the general fund of $5 million. With those 2 transactions, along with the activities, fiscal 17 is going to end up, it looks like, as a positive fund balance, where we'll end up being in the positive sign of things. That doesn't mean it's healthy. It just means that we finally have started turning things around. And in doing so, we are going to reserve $1.5 million into the insurance for loss and risk. So we have that reserve built. And then we're going to begin building the reserve for the general fund, where we should have anywhere from 15 to 25% sitting in reserves for circumstances that are unknown or were not anticipated. So we'll begin building that. You can see that we'll be right at the edge of the 15, which should be the minimum amount we have in reserve in the general fund. But that still leaves us without a solid capital reserve. As the city has gone forward, there's not been a lot of capital improvements to existing longer in place areas of the city. So we still need to continue working at some positive bottom line activities in order to build that reserve as well. So the financial condition, the health of the city is improving. We're not out of the woods, but it's definitely improving. So that's what this is for the general fund. I can't believe I did that. Come back. I eventually will get it right. Hey. Don't hit the little button. Okay, so the other fund that we spent a lot of time on in the last year really looking at it is the financial condition of the wastewater fund. As you know, there's been a lot that's gone on with that. It needs expansion. It needs a lot of improvements. And how is that going to happen? And so we wanted to take some additional time to do more analysis of the wastewater fund itself. Same kind of presentation. You can see how the wastewater fund for fiscal 15 really was not as healthy as it should be. And part of that is the continuing effects of them, prior management paying off the bond debt in the wastewater fund. But that then starts to build back up. And you can see that we'll have a capital replacement fund that we're going to begin building in this fiscal year. It'll become $696,000. Those replacements are for the ongoing replacement of equipment and parts of the treatment plant itself. They always need to be done. They're always significant. There's never anything small. When there's an issue at the wastewater plant, it's always big. So we started to build that, which is a $2 million reserve by the time we're done, and then a capital fund contribution, which will be for the longer-term capital projects that will be related to the sewer fund. We're going to start building that capital reserve. We have an expansion that we're looking at for the future, so that capital reserve needs to be built. So we need to start setting aside our sewer funds and accounting for those appropriately. So even the wastewater fund is starting to show improvement in its financial condition, and you can see that it improves pretty healthily going forward. In looking at the fiscal 18 budget, when we get to this piece of it, you'll see where we've talked about changing it operationally a little bit, where we have a little more control over the day-to-day operations there in order to get a strong handle on our wastewater treatment plant. So in looking at the general fund, one of the things I wanted to go over is...
Milana, do you want us to ask questions as you go along?
Oh, sure. If you have a question, just let me know.
All right.
This part...
I have a small one on the wastewater one.
Okay.
The revenue goes down, and it kind of comes back up. How do we know that projection of the fluctuation on the revenue? Should it be related to growth, or how do we know how to project that?
Right. It's related to growth, and it's related to any change in fees. There's also a piece of the wastewater fund that has to do with developer impact fees. So as development continues, there should also be a continuation of funds that come into the wastewater fund for capital projects as well. So it should be in line with the increase in connections. It should follow that. It should be a fairly easy thing to predict the revenues going forward.
And the highest year of revenue was the audited of 2015, right?
Yes. Now I'm thinking, why? In the wastewater treatment plant in 15.
Do you see?
Yes, and I'm trying to remember why it was higher in 15.
But it's the fluctuation I just don't understand.
Right. I know that we found some errors in the billing for 15 when they did the audit, but I believe those were all prior period entries. They shouldn't have impacted the revenues.
That had to do with the way they were transferring CFD and some other transfers in. And so we've recalibrated that.
Right.
So that's adjusted.
This is just
Thank
the
you.
operations. That's why. See,
Thank you very
And I'm
much.
going to split it apart, so that tells you. This is just for operations. So now we've taken those developer impact fees, those other funds, and we're accounting for them in a separate fund. So they're not in the revenues for 16, 17, 18, and moving forward, they'll be accounted for separately so we can track them.
All right, that makes sense.
Yep. Thank you. Totally forgot that.
Now, the wastewater, is that synonymous with sewer?
Yes,
So you say it's a sewer fund.
yes.
So I pay a fee every month, or every other month.
Every month, right.
That fee went up several years ago. Unbeknownst to me, I never got notification or anything about that fee going up, and all of a sudden it was increased by 20-some bucks.
Yeah.
So I guess the council has authority to approve that, an increase in the fee if need be.
Well, is the...
Apparently,
That's not a Prop 218, is it? It is? If it is a Prop 218, then it has to come for public hearing. I want to say they did that because there was I want to say a schedule of 5 or 7 years of increases, and I think we're coming up on the end of that. Another 2 years, maybe?
probably did.
I think they did.
I was unaware of it. I know oftentimes they'll send notice out via the bill itself.
Right.
I don't know how they did it this time around, but
quite a bit.
One year, and then it seems like little increases, you know.
Right,
They
there's,
must have developed some kind of a schedule, which makes sense. I mean, costs go up. I'm
Right.
not saying I'm opposed to the fee, but I'm just hoping that the process that was done is open and really public.
right.
Every effort is made to make people aware of it so that public can have their say.
Right. My understanding is that they did do that because I remember seeing the schedule, and it was either a 5 or 7 year. Here's the new level and the incremental increases from there. Right. Right.
Melania? I think it would probably be more appropriate to take and be more encompassing in the definition of what this fund is. Because this isn't just the sewer plant. This is for the repairs and maintenance and what have you of the sewer.
It is the sewer, and that's why it's the wastewater fund. It's anything that is encompassed in that function. So anything related to the wastewater. It could be the plant itself. It could be the underlying pipes under the streets. It could be the lift stations. It could be anything, but it's part of the wastewater treatment operations.
I'm just going back to what I heard Mr. Beneke say,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to expand on that because I thought I heard him say it was the plant. And we're not just talking about the
Oh,
plant.
right,
We're
right.
talking about the whole system.
The whole process of it. Mm-hmm.
Now, as I understood it, the city did the 218 hearing as a part of the city council meeting when we had that meeting. But as I recall, one of the things that the water district did when they had their 218 hearing for the rate increase that they had the last time, they had a separate meeting, they had the consultant come in, they invited the community to come into that other than just posting it as a council meeting.
Right.
So
They're a little more open, and as the transparency grows and management has changed, you know, there's a different way of looking at that. It should be properly broadcast. Everyone should have knowledge that this is going to happen. It shouldn't be hit and miss. So it should be something everyone knows about, finds out about one way or the other, so that, yes, there can be full participation. Yeah.
I have a question, Milana.
Mm-hmm.
So this fluctuation in the revenue, where can we see that in the detail? Some of the CFD,
This is not part of the CFD. This is only the wastewater. So what happened, one of the many things, that the wastewater fund was all mushed into one fund in the previous accounting program. And with the new program, I've split it. It's into 3 pieces. So we have wastewater operations, we have wastewater capital improvements, and then we'll have wastewater impact fees, which have specific uses, so that we can see when we have the capital improvements, when we have construction in progress, when we have all of these other projects, they're going to be tracked in that fund on its own. The developer impact fees will be captured in that fund, and then as they're used, we'll be able to track the transfers to the projects in the capital fund. And operations will only be the ongoing operations, which will include some significant maintenance, but that's ongoing, regular, routine kind of maintenance, like cleaning the screens and filters, and it's very expensive, but it's something that does have to be done on a regular basis and is considered a maintenance item. So those are going to happen through the operations fund.
Hold on.
you can see that in the,
Going forward, there will be 3 different funds, and you'll be able to see each one. Yes,
it's in the breakdown.
yes.
On the, one of your sheet on this one here has a more detail on the operations
Yes,
on this. I think it's inside the packet in here.
right. So it's this packet of charts and graphs.
Yeah.
This is where I was going to point this out. The PowerPoint is not going to bring these up, but this is where there's a lot more underlying detail. In this one, I think it's at the very back. Bum, 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 bum.
On that detail, it shows that
Right.
we got 6.7 on 2015 instead of 7 million something.
Right. It was still combined on the
it
audit.
combined?
It hadn't been pulled apart when we put the audit numbers up.
Okay.
So
this one,
this
one's
section.
more updated.
Right. So
Okay.
this one, now we have the actual sources by the 3 funds. We have the operations fund, the mitigation fund, and then the capital projects funds. So they're at the very back. They're the last 5 pages or so.
Oh, okay.
And you'll be able to see each one.
Can I ask you questions on that, on the expenses side?
On the expenses,
Since
yes.
you have it in front of you, the sewer operations? What's the dues and subscriptions? I mean, on 2016 to 2017, you got 97,000, 56,000. Now on 2018, we budgeted 5,000.
Yes, for
What's the difference in
licensing, permits,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, were not in their own category. They were in dues and subscriptions. So if you look at the 2018 column, I added license, permit, and fees to the chart of accounts, and we've budgeted $43,000 to that line item because they really are licensing and fees that have to be paid
Okay.
for the plant. So we're just trying to make things make more
I
sense.
saw that in there, and then I said, oh, what's the difference?
Right. Yeah, it's just getting things categorized in ways that make more sense. It doesn't make sense that a sewer treatment plant has dues and subscriptions. So, but when you look into the detail, you see their licenses and other fees that they have to operate. So that made more sense.
Okay. My next question is on the, since we're in that topic, is the contractual services.
Yes.
We budgeted 1.9, and the last year we have 4.4. I
Yes.
said, ooh, what's the difference in that? I mean, why we dropped?
Well, if
So it
you
means
look-
that we're doing well?
Well, if you look in the section
that.
for personnel expenses, what we're
Efficiency,
trying to
yeah.
do is get away from the contract that we have someone else actually operating our plant and hiring in our own staff so that we use better resources, better control. So as we build our staff to take care of all the day-to-day, we don't need to have contractors down there taking care of it for us. With a contractor, we don't have anybody if there's an emergency. Like there was an emergency during all the rains.
Yeah.
Contractor's not available for that. And so we should be staffing this for day-to-day and for emergencies for our own community. So, you know, taking a different look at that and getting that turned around, that's why that's changing.
So it means if I look in there, I saw that you have 2 engineers or 1 or 2 add-on on your enhancement on that. Is that the answer on that?
Yes,
Very good.
yes.
Like it.
And you'll see that in some of the graphs, different departments will have that where contractual services are going to come down and staffing is going up. Because if you pay a contractor almost full-time, you could hire your own in-house staff, have better controls, and in some cases pay less. In some cases it's a wash, but having that control over the day-to-day operations is better. Where
More
we can,
efficient, too.
right.
Yeah. Can I add one more? On 2017, you got a projected fiscal year in there. And then we got 5.6 on that year, which is this coming year. And then we have only 3 million. And there's a big difference in there. That's 2.6 million difference in there. I know you got budgeted in there, your telephone, everything really dropped.
Oh, between the fiscal year 16 and fiscal year 17, those two expenses?
Yeah, you
Yes.
got 5.6, and then we're budgeting 3 million.
Yes, because we're going to be using staffing as direct cost
Okay.
instead. And then as long as, in fiscal 15 and 16, the city didn't have a lot of oversight over the operations because we didn't have the staffing. Everything pretty much had stopped. We had nobody in Public Works for a long time. So now that we've got somebody in there, we've done a lot of work to clean up what needs to clean up. And as we get it back on track and get on a regular recurring basis, then those costs should start leveling out too. So it's all part of the same process, trying to get it back to a regular service routine. So,
Nice to understand that, because 2015 up to 2017, you averaged that at your 4.1 or 4.2. Now we're budgeting 3 million. We save a good thing in there.
right,
Good job.
right.
Lania? Trying to get into the area that he's talking about. I see that you're talking about vehicle maintenance, fuel, and some issues that would relate to equipment.
Yes.
But I don't, unless I missed it here, I don't see anything here where you're taking and showing purchasing of the equipment needed to pay those,
Right, that's going to be in the wastewater capital fund. So this is the operating fund. The page behind it is the mitigation fund. And if you look at the third one, that's going to be our capital projects fund. So in the capital projects fund for the sewer, we have planned $3.4 million in expenditures for capital. A big chunk of that is that first stage of design for the expansion. And then there's also the additional $400,000 that is going to be towards capital expenses, towards new equipment, getting things replaced, getting things online. We have no trucks over there, so we need a truck. We need a, what's it called? I call it a vacuum truck. That is not what it's called. Vector truck. It's a Vector truck, but it's a vacuum truck. So we need a lot of things like that are not there right now. So that's all of that will go into that $400,000 we budgeted.
TV cameras, sewer cleaning equipment.
In the sweeper.
Yes, there's something, not the Vector. There's something else for the pipes. Wasn't there some, or was that something else we talked about where they could do an evaluation of?
That's the TV camera.
It's the camera. Okay.
The Vector truck's got a jet, so there's also.
For the flushing out of the pipes and stuff. So.
And then the 3.4 will be capitalized, so we will see on our PM&L.
Right, so it will show up here as we actually incur the costs, and then at the end of the year, we'll have a reclassification pulling it from the profit and loss to put it on the balance sheet. If it's a completed asset, we'll begin depreciating. If it's not, it'll go into CIP, and we'll start tracking all of our projects.
You said in the future we will see the balance sheet that we have. I know we
Yes.
discussed it last time.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Is it summarized a little bit? Because you got more detail on your cash report.
Right. No, it will be building, equipment, furniture, improvements, CIP. And then if we wanted to drill into CIP, we also have a module for project accounting, and we can pull up the projects that make up the CIP, and we can look at where we stand, how the funding has gone, how much we've spent. We can budget each project independently. We can track all of that multiple years. So. So that's at the back of this big packet of graphs. The other, no, we didn't. The first one, the very first graph in the packet that you have that's not on the PowerPoint is really the budget of the city. It's all of the funds of the city. The general fund, which is the one we've been talking about, and then the sewer fund, where we were talking about the operational part of that. But here you can also see where we have got our budget in for our restricted funds, our other capital funds. Transit is currently, there's no numbers in that column, and then our agency funds, so that we can see what the budget looks like citywide. I mean, we're most focused on the general fund and, of course, the sewer fund. Transit, they go through a separate process, and we will get ourselves aligned better with that timing where they have to go through the short-range transit plan with RCTC. They've already started through that process, and I believe they've already submitted their final. So we haven't put it in here because there's nothing for us to really report yet. It's more RCTC accepting their numbers, then we can put them in and we can accept those as well. But it's a different method of going through it. We will get to where timing-wise it all happens at the same time, but we're still just a little bit behind.
RCTC is a net zero to our budget.
Yeah.
Right,
RCTC provides an allocation that covers 100% of the transit operating.
right.
Is it possible to see the percentage of a line item so we could see the trend?
For,
If possible, I mean, on the revenues and expenses, I mean,
within the funds, the more detail below, yes.
Yeah, I mean, because on the graph, you got the presentation there, and I was reviewing it this afternoon, and I said, oh, okay. I like to see the trend on that, from 2015 to 2018 budget.
Right.
That'd be great.
And
And then
we
also, we will see the actual versus your budget, right? Our budget.
As we go forward.
Yes.
Yes, we will.
Okay.
We will. Just behind that graph, we have the expenditures by the individual departments that we track within the city, and then the little pie chart that then shows you absolutely public safety is the biggest chunk of our cost, and that's the way it should be. Then I took the same expenses and I broke them down by their line items. So rather than by department, you know how much is personnel or how much is telephone. So you have the total amount for the general fund on what we're budgeting per expense line item.
Yeah, that's the one I saw that we need percentage on the right-hand side.
Yes.
That'll be great.
Yes, and then personnel and
Yeah.
operations costs are almost equivalent, which is pretty amazing. That does mean, though, that we have room to change some of our contractual service agreements into in-house staff. Usually you don't have it splits almost evenly like that. Usually you have more personnel than other costs, so.
Just on the chart also, I saw here now, you have a number of employees. Can we incorporate that on every departments we have? I mean, like this one, the general fund? Can we
To
just
know how many
parentheses?
FTEs per
Yeah,
department?
so we could, say that reasonable or not reasonable, and then
Right.
the trend, we could,
On a year to
logically
year.
could talk about it.
We do have that. It's just not in the financial reporting that comes out, but we do track that. We have everything broken down by person, by position, whether it's been filled or not. So if we have open positions, we take those into account. So I could always just like add it to the report as far as how many FTEs were allocated for that department for each of the years. We could do that too. Okay.
Because on the sewer operation, I
It
could
was-
understand now.
right.
That,
It
you
went
got
from
two
0
engineers, one
to-
engineer here coming in.
Right.
So that makes sense now.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
We did a general fund trend line so that you could see the revenues, how they changed, and then the total expenses and how they changed. You can see there's a gap. And that's our positive because our revenue has been trending higher than the expenses. Our revenues continue to grow steadily. We have the little bump with fiscal 17, but again, those are those two one-time line items, the 3 million and the 5 million, that made it just have a little spike. The expenses also, they've been under control, but just under the same kind of linear line. So it comes together for fiscal 18 because we budget at a 0 point. So they meet at the end because we budget our revenues and our expenses as the same number, and then everyone can be held accountable. If revenues go up, then if there are costs that we need to look at incurring, we can bring those back to council and get those approved if necessary. If it's significant and we think it can be sustained, then maybe we look at additional staff if we need it, something like that. But any changes would then come back to council for approval first. Okay. I also did the trends of the expenses for the 4 years and the revenues. Revenues turned out 2 pages. I tried to make it into one, but it just would not cooperate, so it's 2 pages long. So those are the line items year to year, but they're in total by line item and not by the individual departments, at least at this point. So this is only the general fund that I gave you as well, so you can see how we've budgeted those.
Can I ask you quick questions on
Sure.
your general fund review analysis on line, a column of 2016 and 2017 projected?
Yes.
It's so funny. You get a business license of 7,000. Why?
It'll probably be higher than that. Well,
I just saw that. We're projecting, you got 210, and the previous one is right there on line.
the 196, yes.
Yeah, and then 196, and then so sudden this year, 7,000.
Right. Our business
We are out of
licenses,
I hope not.
no, we do have business licenses, but they really all come in May and June. So when we did this, our projection, we have a few little places for wiggle room if we need them. So it would be awesome if that came in a lot higher, which I'm sure it will. That just builds our profit for the year. But that was one we didn't change because it really hasn't hit yet. Those statements haven't even been mailed out yet. So I didn't want to bump it up yet.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the cost recovery.
Cost
That's the same thing in there. We don't have any budget on that.
Right. Cost recovery, as I move
Is it the
along and
budget or something?
learn more, cost recovery has to do with insurance claims to pay us back for costs that we had to incur.
Okay.
And what I'd found is that they were incurring the costs and recording the expense at that time, and then whenever they got the recovery, they were recording the income for it, but nobody ever matched them up. It shouldn't be income and it shouldn't be expense. They should be a balance sheet item that you balance out ongoing. So I removed it from the budget because it doesn't belong there.
Okay.
Melania,
Yes.
I've been trying to follow you, and I keep trying to go back between the summary and this report, and what I'm looking at is, here you have the chart that's talking about general fund overview. Mm-hmm. And then you have one here that's talking, and that includes a revenue versus itemized expense. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at one here that talks about expense trend. Mm-hmm. If I'm reading this right, this is basically supposed to be giving me the same information.
In total, it should be giving you the same information.
But what I'm having a problem with, I start looking at it and I'm trying to figure out, am I looking at the same chart? And part of my looking at it is the title plus the colors representing the graft are not consistent between the two.
Okay, so this is the one you're looking at right now that has the 4 lines or 3 lines?
Yes.
4 lines. Okay, so the total
And what-
expenses,
Let me be more specific.
yes.
On this one,
Oh, that one.
if you just take a look at the bottom line. On the one chart, the line is yellow, and on the other one, it's blue.
You find the right one. Oh, yes, the colors are different, but they are the same. They're the same chart. The colors are just different.
So I'm trying to look at this, and the title is a little bit different on this one, and the title's a little, it looks like it's the same chart. Then I try to hone in on it, and as I hone in on it, the colors on the bars aren't the same.
Right.
So am I looking at the same chart or not?
You're looking at this one from the PowerPoint presentation, and you're comparing it to this one.
Right?
Yes. They are the exact same chart. The lines are just different colors. But they are the same. And this is actually the one I was going to talk about next. Anyway, but yes, they are the same. They're just different colors. The top one is all the expenses graphed out for the 4 fiscal periods. You can see the red one here, and in this one, it is blue. Well, I guess that's orange. Orange and blue. The red ones are both red. Orange and the blue represent personnel costs. And you can see that when everything happened in the city, there was a complete renegotiation of all of the labor contracts. There were layoffs. There were terminations. There was a complete change in the way staffing was set in the city. And so the staff costs went down. And they stayed down until now, where we're starting to see where we're really at, and we can rebuild to the level of staffing that we need. So that's that one. The red one is all the other costs, which you can see that took a dramatic increase. That was in a lot of cases where after the first cut of staff, we realized that some things really still needed to be done. We had to hire consultants, or we had to get outside help. So the costs really jumped up. Now they're kind of coming together, and then in the future, you should see them cross back the other way. So it's a realignment of those costs. The very bottom line is the telling line, and that's our capital expenditures. Looks blue there. It's green on the handout that I have, which is a bigger graph. But you can see that very little money was expended towards capital improvements out of the general fund. There just wasn't much spent. So now we've started budgeting for replacements that need to be made, things like that, in the general fund. And so we'll see that line take a few ticks up until we come to a regular replacement.
But a replacement, depending on what that replacement is,
Correct.
will come out of the reserves rather than
Right.
capital.
Right. And I've set up a capital fund so we can track all of those separately by project, so we can start saying, yes, we had this, we've done this. But this is generally for things that we wouldn't capitalize, but it's things that we need to always have in mind for replacement. Computers have become very cheap, but we need to budget for those to be updated, or as we expand staff, we need them to have somewhere to sit, and they have to have a computer to work with. So these things need to be taken into consideration, and they hadn't been really budgeted like that before. Let's see what we have next. This way. We did that one. Okay. So in the general fund, the enhancements. This goes hand in hand with the workshops that we'd had with City Council, where our city manager discussed with council what they saw as priorities for the city, what they believed that the city really needed to focus more on. We looked at that, lots of discussions with department heads and trying to best make all of that fit, and came up with the enhancements of staffing and other costs in order to align with the revenues that we would have available for this upcoming fiscal year. So in the mini graphs that I gave you in the big handout, all the departments have a financial report. So they have a financial report, and then they have a graph so you can see how they're broken out. So they go hand in hand with these enhancements. City Council, being the first department on our list, doesn't really have a lot of changes. So, we're not doing a lot there. City clerk is getting a little bump up as we get that back in line. But administration is where we have the larger of the enhancements as far as City Hall, where we add an assistant city manager to help with day-to-day ongoing, keeping everybody coordinated, doing the same jobs in the same way, and staying on top of public works and all of the different things and coordinating efforts, so that Todd can spend his time doing other things that the city manager needs to keep focused on, and he can also stay integrally involved in the financial aspects of the city and making sure that we have all of the different contracts that we need overall to fund some of these projects as well. Economic development manager, which is seen as extremely important to the future health of the city. An information technology manager, someone who can coordinate all the efforts of all of the different IT functions that goes across the entire city, all the hardware tracking, software, all of that, just day-to-day kind of stuff that happens, which would work hand in hand with our IT consultant to help keep all of our things kind of in order. We seem to try and do that. We have a director who tries to keep on top of all that, but it seems to be something that we need a dedicated person to do. Then we have the human resources and payroll technician. This would be a position to fulfill this entire function. We have someone that does payroll and does the payroll function and all of that. It's half-time payroll, half-time finance department. So in getting someone who does the human resources, which is all the insurance and the benefits and all that, and the payroll function, it would give that person that whole FTE then would come to finance so they could focus on some of the financial things that we need to have done, reconciliations and such. Public information officer and special projects coordinator, somebody who can stay in touch with the public, send out the press releases, let everyone know when something's happening in the city and make announcements. And that helps to keep people all in the know. If we all know what's going on, then there's less worry, there's less unknown, so there's a little less misinformation that's passed around.
Is that person then also assigned to the police department?
No, this would be from City Hall. The police department has quite a bit in resources where they do public information. They have their reverse 911. They have all of those things that they are doing now. So yes, they work together, but it would be someone here at City Hall.
I asked the question because when I see officer,
Oh,
police department.
yes, yeah, no,
So I'm
not a,
thinking that maybe the title maybe needs to be massaged. If it isn't a part of the police department.
right, maybe change the title. Okay.
That's an industry standard.
I have a question.
Yes.
These position enhancements came about how?
Through discussions with City Council, through their workshops, right? They did a lot, we did 3 different workshops, I think. One where you brainstormed all the things that you really would like to see happen in the city, the direction the city should take. Yeah.
Now, enhancements means that you're eventually going to get there, like in a 2, 3, 4-year period, or are you going to throw them all in this budget?
They are in this budget.
They're in this,
They are in the fiscal 18 budget.
therefore the increase in your personnel.
Yes. Right.
That's all.
Okay. An executive assistant in City Hall is something we all need. Otherwise, we're always asking each other, do you have this? Can we do this? How about doing this? We really need somebody to keep us all in line. Otherwise, we just kind of run amok. Then, of course, all the equipment that goes with all the new personnel, those would be one-time costs. We shouldn't have to do that again, but then it becomes part of the regular replacement when we start putting those schedules together. The police department enhancements, having a deputy chief of police so that our chief of police can better do his job. He would have someone there then who is available for the ongoing operations at the police station for any special task force items they have, making sure that the change in rotation, the shift changes are all done and they have their meetings. So we'd have better coverage for that. Along with that, getting a sergeant for the MET task force group, they need another person for oversight and keep those task forces moving. Then adding an additional 3 patrol officers to the street. There's been a direction from City Council that we have 1 officer per 1,000 in the population, so we're building towards that. But as the population grows, we don't want to end up further behind. We're getting closer with these officers to getting 0.85 per 1,000, so we just have to find a way to maintain that ratio. Then, of course, they have equipment as well. They have a lot of specialized equipment with the uniforms, the computers, and their vehicles. They have computers that have to be in the cars. They have computers then that are in the office. There's a lot that they have, and that will all have to be purchased as we have the 3 new patrol officers.
Excuse me. Would that figure number for 3 vehicles actually need to be 4? Because are you going to expect the assistant chief, if he has to leave the department, to walk out of the department or use his personal car?
No, I think that our chief of police has a really good handle on the vehicles in their pool, and he's determined that they really only need 3. I believe that 2 of them are for patrol because the way the shift changes will work. So 2 of them will be for patrol, and then the 3rd one then is either for the deputy chief or it's for the sergeant. I've forgotten which way that works. And then we still have vehicles in the pool for them to utilize. They have their unmarked cars and all that. So. Okay. Code enforcement. Currently, we have 1 person in code enforcement, which does not cover the entire slot that we need. So we would be looking at adding another community enhancement officer. We're going to change code enforcement to community enhancement. and then the equipment that that person would need in order to perform their job duties as well.
Milana?
Yes.
Before you leave that page, one of the things that we talked about in the council meeting that may be good information for the finance committee to know is that when these positions are budgeted, they're budgeted for the full fiscal year, and they're budgeted about mid-level salary range. And obviously, it's going to take the city a number of months to fill these positions. So at the end of the year, you may see some budget savings because they're not going to fill all positions at the beginning of the fiscal year. So there will be some savings in that because the number of positions was a little concerning until you start to look at how it'll shake out over the entire fiscal year.
Right. We won't have them all filled, effective on 7/1. It's going to take some time for recruiting and such. And so, yeah, there will be some timing in there. Right. So it'll be just, that one won't be a whole new person, but just a step up for one that exists.
And would the community enhancement officer be using the vehicular pool, or are they going to be walking?
Did we, I want to say we took care of that one too, that there's,
There's pool vehicles.
yeah. I was going to say, we've been through the list of vehicles many times. After a while, you just forget which ones were which, but I'm sure that we got all of the ones identified that we needed to get replacements for. In our planning department, we will have, instead of an associate planner, we're going to have a director of economic development, which will then leave a slot open in the planning department for a senior planner. That will help that side. Community services, we are going to look at getting 3 additional maintenance workers. With the director, our city manager has been able to identify how many man hours it takes for all the parks to get everything taken care of, just for the parks, not including all the medians and all the other work that needs to be done. So they've managed to get it all shifted down and needing 3 additional workers. And also coming online in the next year, which we took into consideration, is Noble Creek? Noble Creek? I'm getting there. Because that park is going to be then taken over for maintenance by the city. So we had to take that into account too. Then we're also looking at a lead recreation specialist from a part-time position.
Okay. Yeah, we need to clarify the park name.
I don't remember the name of the.
I know. I forget the park name too.
Palmer?
Nicole.
Palmer.
Yeah,
So
not Noble Creek.
Nicholas?
Nicholas.
Nicholas.
Okay.
That's what it was.
See, I had the N.
You
That's
had the
all I
N
had.
right.
Yes.
But we want to make sure we get the
Yes.
right.
Nicholas Park. Nicholas.
We're not taking over
So,
Noble Creek.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that on Oak Valley Parkway or?
Yes.
Yes.
It's the new one that Argent just opened last year.
Oh, okay.
Right. So, and it's a big park. So we'll have that.
The one that I couldn't find the toilets for, that Mrs. Knight kept talking about when she was on council, and it's around the corner on the next street.
Oh,
Wow.
okay.
You can't see it from Oak Valley Parkway. You have to go up Palmer Way or whatever that street is.
Maybe there's an app for that, huh?
Also changing to a lead recreation specialist, one of the part-time positions to a full-time position, who could then also assume the pool management since it's open such a short period of time during the summer. And then we did increase their budget for special department supplies so that they can do a lot of park maintenance and upgrades and update plant materials and all that kind of thing. Street maintenance. Our street maintenance currently is 2 individual FTEs that are really from the Parks Department. So what we're looking at is getting a dedicated street department staff with the experience of streets to be able to manage our street issues. And that would take 1 supervisor and 4 workers. It then takes the two that have been allocated to that back into the Parks Department to help fill the needs that would be there. For a street maintenance crew, they need a patch truck. They'll need pickup trucks and dump trailers because they'll be taking materials all over the city, patching the streets, all of the different projects that need to be done, concrete, all those wonderful things. So that would be dedicating a street maintenance crew. This would be the beginning of that, especially with the rains. Just this last year, we saw what a toll that took on the streets, and we need a team that's dedicated to taking care of those issues. Absolutely.
Couple things. that,
Microphone. I was told you have to talk to the microphone.
Part of the decorum.
Yeah, a couple things that are important to note on the street maintenance side is that when you look at our revenues, we have a couple major things that have happened that are bringing in significant dollars to the city over the next at least 10 years. One is the settlement agreement that we have with WRCOG brings us back into the 10th program, hopefully. And that has Measure A dollars, which are sales tax dollars that we're currently entitled to that become allocated back to us. So for next year, we're estimating 6 months of that, which is about $433,000 of additional unrealized prior revenue that's coming in. That's for 6 months. And so when you begin to look at 18, 19 and beyond, you begin to hit 900 and then 1,000 and then potentially up to $1 million, $1.2 million once you get to the 2039 time when that program expires. The other aspect is with Senate Bill 1 passing, that's the 10-cent sales tax allocation that was applied by the legislature. That next year, or for next fiscal year, is projected to bring in about $226,000. That is expected to grow to basically bring about $10 million in over the next 10 years. So, we're looking at long-term sustained revenues coming in that are in addition to the dollars that we currently have today. So those are contemplated with phase 1. So that street maintenance program is likely to grow. And we're doing two things. The first is GASB. We're doing our GASB analysis, which will look at the pavement condition of the city across all of our public streets. We'll get an idea. Once we get that completed, we'll be doing an analysis which will look at an actual capital plan that we need to be able to upgrade and maintain our streets to a level that council will determine needs to be established. So that'll all kind of roll in and roll out. So the bottom line is over the next 5 years, you're looking to have about $9 million of additional cash that'll come in that'll go just to streets, and they're restricted to our street program rehabilitation.
I personally think that dollar amount might be a little low. If Trump is successful at all in getting some kind of major infrastructure program going, there could be a trickle-down effect. In addition to what you're talking about, there could be additional dollars flowing down to cities for these kind of projects.
You might have gold-plated and platinum-plated curbs.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Maybe copper.
But I would ask that before you take and work on the curbs, work on the storm sewers.
All together, yes, sir.
So the street maintenance is, we're looking to really make some great strides of improvement there. And the revenues that he's spoken of, those are budgeted in, as he said, in the 17-18 budget. So it's all in there together, scooped up. Public Works, now that our Public Works Department got strong leadership, they're really starting to build what they can do. And as that happens, because Public Works was really at a standstill for a year, now there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done. And so we're looking at 2 engineers and an analyst. The engineers will be shared between the general fund and the wastewater fund because they're going to have to be able to do engineering for both sides. So that'll be a shared cost. And then, of course, the equipment that they'll need to do those respective positions. A lot of that is outsourced now. So bringing it in-house will really improve the whole department. Then here's where we went through, which we already kind of did this, but this is our wastewater overview where we were looking at the numbers and where they stand and how it's going to change or not change. So you can see here we had summarized things by the operational and then the capital. And the capital expenses will be funded through the developer impact fees and any capital reserves that we're able to pull from operations in order to keep that up and running. We have a few of the costs already budgeted in for 17-18. That will also continue as we take over more of the day-to-day operations from the contractor. I believe some of that equipment is owned by the contractor, so the city is going to have to take some ownership in some of the equipment. So as we go forward, we're going to see these kinds of needs. And I think that was the end of the PowerPoint. So I'm not sure if you have any other questions, maybe, if you'd even had a chance to look at some of the materials that was on the website. But we've been looking at the numbers over and over and over, trying to make sure that we don't forget anything. We tried to budget the revenues conservatively so that we don't overextend ourselves, trying to make sure that whatever positions we add to the city staff, one, that it's done conscientiously, and that it's something that can be sustained given the conditions we know of right now. And because with staff, and there's the human element where you have somebody that you're hiring into a position, you don't want to hire someone, train them, and then in 2 years find out, well, we didn't do those revenues right, so now you can leave. Thank you for your service. We just don't want to do that. So we're trying to be very careful in how we're budgeting, and we're really trying to stay in line with those revenues. We don't want to do all of our expenses and then just plug revenues and say, see, it's balanced. We're trying to do this all with as much background and knowledge as we have, looking at historical, looking at projections for the county, for the entire Inland Empire region. We use HDL to look at sales tax trends, property tax trends. We look at the county's records. We look at the state's records. We're trying to get a really tight control over those revenues. And as we go forward, we're just pinpointing them better and better. So,
Did you want to discuss the next couple of slides? Because that involves additional personnel.
which ones are those? The
Wastewater fund enhancements.
we could do that. Okay. There's the two engineers that we talked about already with the general fund and the analyst. And then we're hiring the 3 staff for the collection crew. That would be there for day-to-day operations. One of the things that Transit has budgeted in their program with RCTC is an additional equipment mechanic. They are really busy over there all the time. So having another body over there to do equipment maintenance and working on the vehicles is something they really need. And knowing that if it can be fixed in-house, we are working on our own vehicles in-house, and know that if the general fund has vehicles being worked on at the transit yard, that the general fund has to pay for that, because that's not a cost of transit. That's a cost of doing business in the city under the general fund. So we also track that so that we make the right allocations of those costs. But that would be for transit.
We've saved a lot of money by going in that direction versus sending the vehicles
Oh, yes.
out. We have saved a great deal over the last 2 years.
There's still some things that we have to send out for. I mean,
know.
there's just some things you
Yeah.
can't know everything in-house.
No.
And if they get really backed up, sometimes you just need a little extra help on some things. But for the most part, the guys at the yard have done a great job. Absolutely great job.
I have a question, Milana.
Right. That's why I say anything actual on a general fund, the general fund pays for it. But yeah, it's funded. All of the actual transit is fully funded by RCTC. So
I have a question, Milana.
yes.
We have an unfunded pension liability, from what I understand. Where does that get expensed, or where does that show?
That is GASB 68. We make all of our pension contributions based on actual on an ongoing basis. We don't have any unpaid based on what is happening today. GASB 68 looks at the future of the retirement plan and says, what if the whole system had to stop right now today and you had to continue making these benefit payments out to everyone in the plan for whatever your plan says, how much would it cost you? Which is, it's good to know that you have this out there, but it's not something that you fund. It's not something that you have to make contributions towards until you're doing it. It's based on retirements, and hopefully by then the plan is that the individual with the match from the city or the civic organization has been making enough to cover those costs in the future. But in the meantime, they do all these actuarial calculations to see what would it cost you right now today, and then boom, you have this liability. We have a liability fund where I track those kinds of liabilities, things that are looking into the future, so these GASB pension liabilities, as well as the accrued vacation and sick leave that the staff has. If they were to separate service today, how much would we owe, all of the staff? Well, that's a liability, and we record it there, but the likelihood of having to cash all of that out at one time is unlikely. So,
Plus the state runs actuarials on PERS and PEPR.
right.
And the state determines what those contribution rates need to be as a portion of a payroll function. And so that's what we're funding to. And so by GASB, as Milana alluded to, one of the new rules is now you have to book pension liability against your balance sheet. So,
Right.
But
So-
it's a calculated payment that's determined to us by the state as they run their actuarial.
So you're paying a higher percentage?
No.
It's not just an actual percentage of the payroll?
No, and it's not something that you pay in. It's just a calculation of,
It's just a number
here's
that
how much it is, right?
they,
Right. And different organizations have different plans, so they have a different rate or they have a different actuarial calculation entirely. So it just varies hugely based on what is the benefit for this group that they look at.
because I'm assuming that a lot of the employees working for the city are under the old percentage, 3% at 60, was it?
I think so. Yeah, a tremendous amount are, because the PEPR rules are fairly recent. So there are some, but I would say the majority is under the older rules. But we don't have the other pension benefits. The city doesn't pay the health insurance premiums of those who have retired over their life. We don't have that kind of benefit. So we don't have those kinds of astronomical calculations in our future pension liabilities. It's really just whatever we have in that PERS contract. There's nothing else.
And that's a significant
Oh, it's very
difference
significant.
between a lot of cities,
Oh, yes.
that we do not have that.
We do not have,
liability
they call it
hanging over our head.
OPEB, and yes, the city of Beaumont does not have an OPEB program.
When you're hiring new employees, I understand, do you need to give, or do you have to give preferential treatment to people who have worked in the government
No,
in other cities?
no. No, it's based on, depending on the position, we have a committee that looks at all the applicants. They could have a test that's required. They go through an interview process. There's no preferential treatment to anyone. And not only that, but if someone does come in, if they've worked for government before, then we have to go to PERS and say, are they grandfathered in under the old rules? If they've never worked for government before, it's automatic. They go under the PEPRA rules. So there's a lot to consider at that hiring point, but that is not part of the consideration for the actual candidate.
Okay.
The brain begins to think. When you talked about no consideration for previous government service, did California ever have a program where if you worked in, say, one governmental agency and you had accumulated sick leave and that you could take and go to another agency and they would have the option to give you that sick leave if you didn't get paid for it?
I don't know that California allowed that. There are certain organizations out there that have that agreement between them, but I don't think that's a state of California rule. Mostly if someone terminates their employment or their employment is terminated for them, they're paid out whatever that liability is. It doesn't transfer.
I was just thinking back when I retired many years ago that I left a number of hours on the table, got paid for it, but if I went there within 10 years,
It
they had a
reverted?
deal that they could or could not, if at their choice, give you those additional hours.
Yeah, I have not seen that any time in the recent past. No.
Let me ask you this. From what I understand in some previous, I don't know how many previous years, how far it goes back, but the employees' portion of their pension was being paid by the city,
Correct.
the 8% or whatever it was. And now they're paying a certain percentage, and then each year they're paying more of a percentage.
Right.
So you might, I don't know, do you all know that, or?
Yeah, that was part of the renegotiation of the MOUs when everything happened in 2015, is that the employees would begin to bear their own costs for the pension contribution. And it's a lot to hit somebody with all at once, so it is being phased in over several years. I believe it's 3% a year, so I think we just started year 2, so it's up to their 6%. I want to say it goes to 8. I think that's the max. So I think next year then it adjusts again, and then they're paying their full portion of the PERS contribution.
I just have one last question. I notice on the, the revenues, the 31 million revenue, you do a breakdown on property tax, sales tax, and motor vehicle and road tax. Those three items account for roughly 12, 13 million. So the other 20-some million comes from,
Fee for service, different types of things. It comes from pet licensing. It comes from permits, business licenses, fees for inspections.
I know we talked about a while back, a review of permits and fees and increases and all that kind of stuff. Has that been done? Have any fees been increased?
Yeah, not yet.
We never heard that.
Right. The fee study, we got a rough draft of some of the allocations that we've been looking at on the management side, but we don't have anything to present quite yet. They aren't done with the whole overarching thing, but we're getting there.
So these projections you're presenting do not include
Any increases. Right.
They anticipate about a 6% increase on the building permit side and on the engineering plan side.
But that's not on a change of the fee.
That's based on the fee. That's based on the initial recommendation they gave us. Because they said we could expect about a 10% increase on the fee schedule.
Right.
The development engineering related fees. So
Right.
be a little conservative. We took 6% there, but we haven't adjusted any other fees in the room. So
No,
these are
no.
straight line. We're trying to be conservative.
Right.
Okay. And so looking at sales tax revenue of 5.1 million, personally, I think that's low considering where we sit geographically on the 10 freeway. I think that should almost be double.
Well, it's not.
Well, if we had the kind of economic development that the potential exists for this community, you go over to Home Depot, you see all that vacant property out there. That could all be generating sales tax revenue. So, I guess what I'm saying is, it's nice to be able to have money to finally get to an administrative staffing level, to be able to provide the service level that we need for our citizens and the community. But don't lose sight of the fact that that's only sustainable if you continue to invest in the future.
Right. Which the
We
economic.
need to invest in the future
Right.
by providing ways to generate business activity in this community. So I think you're moving in the right direction by getting some people in place, but we really haven't had the aggressive type of people we need, I think, to go out and solicit. You go to Redlands, you see that gigantic thing they built out there. And I went to the movie theater for the first time, and the only thing I could think of is, oh, the sales tax. Although they do have a 3-part city agreement to share that, but still, I mean, that just generates so much money. But a budget ought to be looked in a sense in 2 ways. You got know, sustainability of your staff, your community, your quality of life issues, but also how do we continue to sustain that? You know, and your budget's only going to go up. You're hiring staff now, your personnel costs, everything's going to go up. So you need to get involved, and hopefully, and I'm sure the council's very aware of this. I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but you know, you need to balance those two things.
Right. And we're going to be looking further into the future. I mean, we're budgeting for fiscal 18, but I know we're talking about 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. You have to have some idea of what's coming in order to stay on track. So,
And those are good points, and that actually supports, too, the importance of the city manager, the assistant city manager, and the economic development person.
oh yeah.
Not only from what you said in the sense that you want to make sure that you're moving forward and maximizing so that you can balance your revenues appropriately, but also that kind of expertise is critical going forward because the retail profile is changing with so much of it going to online. So you need sophisticated players involved who understand where the trends are going and making sure that that 5-year, 10-year plan is solid.
Right, right. And the other thing with economic development, it's never an immediate activity. It's something that you work at and you work at and you work at. So it takes time to build that. And so you can't look at that as, you know, building the budget revenues for next year. Next year is time to start breaking ground and getting your toe in the water and start to get people to want to come here. So,
But you can use the budget to support
yes,
an element of economic development,
absolutely.
which I don't think the city's really done in the past. I haven't seen it anyway.
Well, that, you're absolutely right. It's just like your budget at home. You want it to support what it is that you want to do and where do you want to go and how do you do what you need to do to run it, but also where do you want to take your family and your household and provide for college or take trips or do whatever the mix is at home. And it's the same for the city. That budget has to match where the city wants to go.
Thank you. So are there any other concerns? Anything else that you think we maybe should consider or look at? No? Okay,
I guess.
okay.
Good job.
Thank you. We do not have a grant writer. That is in my wish list, but it hasn't come to fruition quite yet, but that's definitely on my wish list.
It's, thank you for doing the most realistic, fleshed out match to the strategy, cohesive explanations, real substance underneath it, budget. Really appreciate it.
Sure. He's the driving force. He's got a lot of foresight, and he's getting us all moving in the same direction, so it's pretty good. Oh. Good deal.
Keep talking that way.
So
Okay, let's move on. Item
should-
number 5.
we should make a motion that we probably agree that the
The
budget
budget.
looks like it can be recommended to council. What do you think, Mike,
Yeah.
right?
I agree unless Finance Committee has questions or needs to examine the budget further. I think we should make a motion.
Any discussion on that? I mean,
Well, I'll make the motion that the Budget Finance Committee has reviewed the 2018 budget
mhm.
and that we hereby recommend it to the city council for approval.
Second. Who will second?
Do we have a second already? I'll second it if we don't.
Nancy, second. Any discussion on that? None? Let's vote. Aye.
Aye.
Carried. Okay, item number 5, report up from the subcommittee, SEO.
I'll take that as a member of the existing subcommittee. And you are too, so feel
Yes.
free to jump in. The current subcommittee is Ray, myself, and Jennifer Burnett. We'll get to it later, but we're going to be losing Jennifer.
Jennifer, yeah.
So, and also the initial beginning of this SEO checklist where the committee was working on it with staff, we let it go for a number of months as we were doing the financial software. It was really something that so many of the items were going to be addressed in the financial software. We thought we'd circle back after the software was in place. So it's also probably timely that we review who's on the subcommittee and we see if we need to make any changes on that. The state controller's checklist, I emailed Milana today, my last copy, just to make sure that she had what my last copy was on it. There hasn't been any updates since, I don't believe it's October of 2016 was the last time that it came before the Finance and Audit Committee. So there really isn't a substantive update to give you tonight anyways. So I think we should, my recommendation is take each one of those items and take item A first. I think that's appropriate.
Okay. Open for discussion or anything?
Is there a need for the subcommittee? There is a need for the subcommittee.
Yeah.
There is, I think there is, because you need somebody to communicate with staff. We can't all communicate with staff, and then you need to have the subcommittee making sure. There's no eyes and ears on sort of following and making sure that it's moving ahead. And we might be able to get rid of it after a meeting or two just to make sure that staff has been able to get all their input into it. But there certainly was at the beginning a need for it.
Correct. And I acknowledge that there was a need in the beginning, but the last checklist that I saw, albeit it's a living, breathing document, it's ongoing pretty much. But I mean, it was coming together really well, and it's on the website. You can go and find out what's been done in the categories that were raised, or questions were raised. So other than maybe having that checklist come to us on a quarterly basis for review and comment, I don't know if the subcommittee really needs to exist.
It's a good question, really. I mean, I agree. It needed,
Yeah.
at its start, it needed to be, but
Absolutely, because it was a lot of input.
Yeah.
Input on format and everything else that went into that document. But at this point in time, I think it's moving, unless there's a problem with it. I think our charge is to review that and see if there's any shortfalls in it, like how come this hasn't been done when it should have been done 6 weeks ago or 6 months ago? I mean, and I don't know if the subcommittee wants to do that and then bring it back to the committee, or it could be done as a committee as a whole on a report basis,
well,
as a report to the committee.
it's pretty much, most of the updating now really needs to be done by staff since the implementation of the financial software. And which kind of puts it all in Milana's pocket a bit, because she's the one that also knows all of the specifics in the financial software that address each one of those things. But I don't want to.
Imposed.
Do you want to volunteer, Milana, to be the subcommittee? You're going to end up updating it anyways. No, I'm teasing. No, but do you want to
update.
Is it appropriate from your perspective that we give it to you to update and then you just bring it back to us?
We could do that. If we want to start looking at the piece that you sent me, I can make some notations on it so we have something to discuss at the next meeting. I believe that was just the first finding, right?
Yes, the intent, but that was the biggest.
Right. And so
It had
after that,
most
maybe we
everything
can
in.
just take one point at a time and discuss each one just in general rather than go through that level of detail. There's just so much repetition. It just, I don't want anyone to have to do things over and over and over and over. So we could do it that way.
I think that we have a committee that was working on it, and from what you have preempted and told us already, one of the members is planning on leaving, but it was assigned to us. It was something that was supposed to help with the answer to the state auditor. And by completing that task, we may be able to, should there be another report on the next audit that needs to be answered, it would take and give us some final information as to what did we do good and what did we do wrong in order to answer that next one if there has to be answers given back and we're asked to assist in that.
Well, not every city has a state controller's checklist. We had a state controller's checklist because we needed one. And so we're hoping that if I believe, and if anybody else thinks differently, that by addressing everything that's on that checklist and maybe looking at any other improvements that we've done just as an organic part of the process, that will basically, that the state controller's office won't come back in because we don't want another checklist. But we do need to make sure that everything that's in there has been wholeheartedly addressed and eliminated wherever possible. So hopefully we won't have another state controller's checklist. We will just make sure that every one of these items is addressed fully. And there may be some that just really quite don't apply to us, as I recall.
Absolutely.
There were a few that fell in that category.
Right.
So there's always going to be something that just doesn't apply to us.
Right.
But everything that we can address will be done.
Is this a report that still needs to go to the state controller's office?
No. This was their findings on the city of Beaumont, and there's no requirement to report back to them. There's no indication that they're coming back to check up on us. You never know, but there's no indication of that. And we have taken their suggestions to heart. We've made as many changes right away as we could, and since then we're into tweaking things and getting them all set so that we're in compliance with the majority of what they've asked. And basically what they gave us was their entire audit manual, turned around and said, here, do all these things because you weren't doing them before. So that's why I say it's repetitive. You start reading through the findings and it's the same general things over and over. There was no control, no one was watching, and they left the fox in charge of the hen house. That's really what it came down to. So it's a matter of making sure we have checks and balances, and are we looking at this, and have we looked at that, and did we consider this, and then coming up with what do we have controls on. So
I would like to see, maybe, and I know you're busy with the budget and working through that, maybe an agenda item. I know I'm kind of taking two items, but maybe we stop the security committee meeting, or stop this, the state controller, stop that committee, and maybe have Milana bring back the status of the checklist.
right, I can do
Maybe
it.
the
We can do
last
it in pieces, or we can just take one finding, or we can take the checklist as we have it now and go over some of it at each meeting until we work our way through the whole thing.
And maybe we just have it's a standard item on our agenda, and either there's an update or there isn't, but at least we're monitoring it as it moves forward. And then once it's complete, we can we can close that portion of it out and have it, the completed item posted on the website.
The whole idea
So
behind it
good
was
idea.
transparency. All the state controller, all these things belong with the city, and we wanted to make sure that the community knew that we were aware of it, number one, and that we were transparent in terms of what we're gonna do to fix the problem.
Right.
And we're fixing it, and it's 90% there, 80% there,
Yeah.
whatever, and it's on its way to being fixed, so.
Right. That it was taken seriously.
Well,
And
absolutely.
that's what everyone wants to know, so.
Is the last update online? I
No,
have one dated July 28th.
that is the state controller's report, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, no, there's no change to that at all. No, we were talking about the checklist, but we didn't put that online because we hadn't really discussed anything as far as the responses on it, had we? I didn't think we had. We'd reviewed like the
Right.
format and the questions, but we hadn't really done anything to where we had something to present to the public. So I don't think we put any of our responses out there yet, because we
Okay.
haven't really gone through them.
Go ahead.
That is true. It was such a work in progress.
Right.
We also wanted the support and approval of the Finance and Audit Committee that the format that we were starting to put in place for checking on these things was approved before we started going all the way through it. But what you said, Richard, is absolutely correct. And just to clarify, what you have dated in July is the state controller's report. There was no state controller's checklist. So you got a report from the state controller's office that said, here are your problems.
Everything.
And then what we did proactively as a city was we developed a checklist on each one of those problems so that we would have a method for applying tracking to fix them. There's no requirement from the state controller's office. We just did it as a way to make sure that those things were being tracked and addressed. And that's why you see the report dated July, and that was the state controller's report that said, here are all your shortcomings. And then we turned it, and what you said, Richard, proactively into that checklist so that we could track every one of those items and make sure that we were addressing them. So that if an auditor ever came in again, we would be able to make sure that we knew every one of those things had been vetted.
Are we ready to put that on the website? Do we want to put it on the website?
It's
We haven't
certainly
discussed
not
anything yet
probably
as
till
far
it
as
gets updated.
findings and confirmation of changes. We haven't really talked about anything other than
Yeah.
that first
Yeah.
set, which was 12 pages of points, but we hadn't really gone through any of it yet. So no, it's not on the
We
website.
brought it into the meeting and passed it out, but it was a work in progress that we just hadn't finished.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sharon.
I don't think that,
Oh,
in answer to Mr. Benecke's comment, I don't think we're prepared to put it on the website. I think it has to be completed, be accepted by the council, and then it could go onto the website.
Right.
Well, let's do that then.
Right. So we need to start working our way through the SEO report.
go ahead, Sharon.
I think it's extremely important that this committee goes through that to make sure everything's been done. Otherwise, someone outside of staff needs to look at that.
Right,
Well, we're the people outside of staff.
right.
So when it comes back here, we're gonna look at those items. I mean, it was this committee that decided upon the checklist. Nobody decided on it, so to speak, for us. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that happens and make the recommendation to council that we're on point.
So we need to circle back
And
on
now-
it.
Mike, please.
Well, unless anybody has an objection, I have a motion I'm prepared to make.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that the Bologna take the subcommittee checklist and bring that back to a meeting in June. I don't know if it's our next meeting. I'm not sure what your end of June, last meeting in June, would that give sufficient time to update the checklist?
We can take a look and see what all happens between now and then.
Okay,
Subject to change.
For review by the Finance and Audit Committee
Okay.
and a future action at that time.
Okay.
Second it. Any discussion? Yeah, he did second it. Okay, let's vote.
Aye.
Aye. Carried.
Do you want to speak to the next item, or do you? Okay.
Okay, line item number 6 on committee member resignations. And Nancy will cover that.
Elaine received the resignations of both Diana Harris and Jennifer Lindsay. So we have 2 more openings on the committee. Elaine got the resignations by email, so she'll probably, I'll mention to her to forward them over to the city manager so that they're on record that they resigned. But that means we have 2 openings on the committee. So we need to get more committee members. And we need to, anybody have any recommendations on, I've already spoken to one member in the community that I was hoping would apply as an alternate, but I think that probably we need the committee to discuss what the steps should be going forward to getting more committee members.
Or probably we need the guidelines on how we're going to get, the way we were processed before, there was elections. We've been interviewed and there was, 16 on the list. And I don't know what happened to that list. And if we could visit that list, maybe still interested on that. Instead of, chasing everybody out there. So that's the way I see it on this resignation. This is my first time seeing it. So that's my thing in there.
Well, normally in the process, you go out and you advertise it, you open it up to the whole community.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to put it in whatever media, paper, whatever. And I thought that was an ongoing thing because we were actually short alternate members.
Yeah.
Had we, recruited alternate members, we wouldn't be in this pickle. We'd have people that would automatically come. Like I came as being an alternate member. I hung around long enough that that kicked me up. But anyway.
Go ahead, Mike.
What if we suggest that the treasurer in her report let council know that we've had the resignations and that there is a need to backfill vacancies and see what direction that they want to take on that?
That's a good idea. Sharon? Okay, got that. Okay. Thank you, Mike.
And sure, and then Mayor Pro Tem Carroll or myself can elaborate more on what's taken place and if necessary.
And I would think that we would be taking and asking them for 4 members, not just 2. Because actually, I believe that we had 2 alternates originally, and they both moved up to members, and one left and went to I think the planning commission or something.
Sure.
Who's that?
He just left for other reasons.
Yeah.
Oh, Sean,
Yeah.
okay.
So we can bring that up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or discuss it. Sharon will bring it up and we'll discuss it. I think that's good. Excellent.
That's good, yeah.
Well, I think we customarily send out a letter of thank you for their service and all that stuff.
I think we should.
Yeah,
That's a very good idea.
that's good.
They were integral part of this whole
Yeah, that's good.
Just out of curiosity's sake, did they, I know you don't have to, but did they give a reason as to why?
for both of them, actually, they gave business, was more demanding, and that they no longer had the flexibility in their schedule that they thought they had.
They will be missed.
Okay, let's move on. Future meetings, agendas items.
SCO checklist is one.
Okay.
Clarification of the city council request for
Verification of,
more information, and what
Oh.
kind of information do they want?
okay.
And probably put on the agenda to get more members. We may need to discuss it at that point, potentially, based on what the city council said. You know, we might need to talk about scheduling time or reviewing or anything as a byproduct of, I mean, I don't know what they're all
Right.
going to say, so you might want to put it on the agenda, possibly.
Okay. Anything else?
Will they,
He's hiding behind the line.
anyway, these community meetings that are going to be scheduled, I mean, is there any need, maybe I'll ask the committee here, is there any need for us to get feedback on how those went? Any reaction of what the communities are doing in terms of action or anything? Is there any?
Yeah, I don't need to know nothing.
Yeah.
Be happy to provide a report back to you. So we'll be doing a full wrap-up report. We're scheduled for the 16th to council. And so be happy to also report back to you guys so y'all know those discussions.
I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think Milana had talked about bringing back some financial reports to the Finance and Audit Committee.
When I set numbers so I can
When you feel confident, yeah. Okay.
With respect to that last comment, would it be wise to put a agenda item just so that she's on the agenda for report and information, and also for the city manager?
Okay.
Yes.
We were having an ongoing agenda item where it was a staff update and the city manager and finance. And somehow or other, it kind of dropped off this one. But it was like a placeholder for any general updates.
Okay, here's the summary on this, the SEO checklist. We will do that, update on that. Verification of more information, what they want. And more members to be added by John. John, open up that. And open discussion on the staff meeting. On this one here, Milana will give us an update and a agenda on some of the stuff. Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, anything else? It's almost 8:20 now. So we adjourned the Finance Audit Committee. Next meeting will be, when? You say,
June 5th, is it? What's the first Monday?
first Monday, what's,
Whatever that is.
5th? That'll be the 5th? The 6th, okay.
It's June 5th.
Fifth.
The 5th, okay, next meeting. Okay, let's adjourn. That'll be 8:18.